Okay. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Haven't streamed in a little while, so it's going to take me probably a little bit of time to get back into it. I see we have a few people in the chat, so what's going on? Hey, Keon, nice. Glad you're here. Got Evan in there. Got Mr. Karstrom. Yeah. I don't think you've been to one of these before. I haven't done one in probably like over a month now, maybe even more, like a month and a half. So, kind of pumped to do it. Also a little bit nervous because again, it's like it is kind of like riding a bike, but then again, it is a little bit different than just sitting there and coding on your own. So yeah, definitely gotta get back into the groove of things. But first things first, can everyone hear me? That is the main question. Is my audio okay? How are we doing there? Cool. All right, you've been working on a project of your own the past week or so, so I'm having trouble getting through it. Nice. Okay. But that's good. That's what we talked about before, right? So you're trying to get through something on your own, and that's kind of key. Like you just gotta, that's development. Like you just gotta kind of code, and you hit roadblocks and you get through roadblocks. Sometimes if you can't get through it, you gotta ask for help. It's tough to know when to do that. It's tough to know when to kind of struggle yourself, but that's all part of it. So it's good that you're going through that. I'm happy about that, and I'm sure we'll touch base a little bit later, maybe next week. Even I think you're almost done, right? Your school. So yeah. So just a quick overview on what we're going to be doing today. I've been kind of delving into making sure I understand all three of the kind of major frameworks, I guess, or the frameworks that are based on each other. Just because I want to make sure if I were to pick up a contract project, or if it were to kind of come in as a consulting firm, I can at least talk from a level of knowledge. I understand the concepts really well, so I don't think it's a problem anyway, even if I don't know certain syntax. But overall, I do want to at least understand what the code is saying. So I kind of went in and learned some of the basic concepts of all the frameworks. I'm a Vue guy. I think a lot of you know that. I've always been on Vue essentially from the very beginning, but I did delve a little bit into Svelte, and then recently I've been delving a little bit into React. So what we're going to do today is build a little really simple application in Vue. It's essentially going to be this little application that you can kind of track how many cups of water you've had during the day and when you had the last cup. It's really, really simple. I've actually posted about it a few times on Twitter, and I've created, I think, a blog post about it. I can't remember if I actually published that or not yet. But regardless, I've made this application a few times now. I've made it in all three already, so I'm going to come at it from a little bit of knowledge already. Like I already have some experience creating it inside of React and Svelte, and obviously Vue. But regardless, we're probably going to have some stumbles. Everyone knows if you've been here, awesome. Okay. I didn't do anything to the audio, so I don't know why it got better, but I'm happy it did. But regardless, I'm just kind of gonna go at it from my own perspective and try to get through it. I'm wondering if it's because my microphone is peaking all the time. Let me just actually lower it a little bit, and so it's not like peaking in your ears and destroying your ears. So I'm creating. This is literally just kind of like an example application. It's not creating them for any sort of benefit in terms of like actually making them into something. I'm creating them literally to show you, the viewers, and to show the people that are watching this later on video, like on YouTube and Twitch video on demand, that it's not hard to transfer your skills from one framework to the other. And there's a lot of similarities between them, and a lot of the concepts, like the core concepts, like hooks, like reactive templates, conditional rendering, all of that stuff is very key to understand, because when you understand it, you can kind of take it and put it into the different buckets. And when you go into a different framework, you can just be like, oh, okay, I understand that I need to have like a on-mounted hook here. So you just look for React on mount, and it'll give you like the use effect, and we'll go over that in a second. But regardless, as long as you understand what you want, it's a lot easier to get to actually developing it, regardless of the technology that you're using. So that's where we're kind of going to go today. It's nothing crazy. I'm not going to go into any sort of detail, like detail. I'm not going to go delve into the frameworks like heavily. I'm just going to cover the basic concepts right now. If it goes well, I'd love to create a more complex application in each of them and then to share that with everyone. But it'll depend on if there's any interest in it or not, or if I'm just talking to kind of like man yells at cloud situation. But I think given people enough time to kind of join us and come in, and regardless, this will be available on demand after. But if you want, you can throw stuff in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat every once in a while. It's going to be to the left of me, so when I'm looking down to the left, you're going to know that that's why I'm looking at the chat. I have my other monitor over here, so when I look to the right, you're going to see me, look all around. I have some reference material on there. But okay, so there's... Keon, you're saying there is no echo now? There was an echo before? Hopefully that's been solved by Twitch itself. I don't know why there would be an echo. But what we're going to do is actually get started with Vue. So Vue is the one I'm most familiar with, so we're going to build it out in Vue. I'm going to get a little bit of a reference material going just so we don't get stuck too far down the rabbit hole for no reason. And okay. So, first things first, when you go, this is Code Sandbox. So Code Sandbox is kind of like CodePen, but it's a little bit more involved in the sense that it actually has all the files you would need to start the project, right? So CodePen is kind of like dumbing it down for you a lot and making it so that you only have to focus on just writing the code, which is great. But with Code Sandbox, it's kind of like you have a mini actual IDE or full-on editor that you can then download all these files and run locally and be good to go. I like this method a little bit better because it's a little bit more descriptive to me. It has all the details that I needed to have, and it matches my production, like my coding environment, right? And it's also quick. Like you can set up a coding environment really quickly, and it kind of has a bunch of templates, so it's nice. Let's see. Let's look at the chat here. Many get tips from the other viewers. If you don't mind, I'd like to put the details of what I'm working on in here. Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Keon. Put it in there because people can answer it, no problem. Yes, how to FPS. I'm making the exact same application 3 times in 3 different frameworks. That is the plan. And we're going to kind of look at the similarities and the differences between them and how to transfer knowledge from one to the other. So first things first in here, we kind of want to just get rid of everything we don't need. So we're going to start from essentially scratch here. Going to get rid of that. Export default. We don't need any of this. Do need a closing bracket here. We're going to get rid of all the HTML, and we're just going to go into components and actually just get rid of that. We don't need it. Assets, we actually don't need the logo as well, just to have some kind of like a clean project. And with that, it's going to give me a little error here saying that the template has to have something in it, which is true. And the first thing we're going to do is actually create the HTML layout of the application. Before I do that, I'm just going to quickly show you the UI of what we're going to be creating, just so you know where we're heading. So this is kind of what we're doing here right now. We're going to be creating a UI like this. It's going to have today's date automatically generated. It's going to have the amount of cups that you drank of water today, and then it's going to have a button that essentially adds a cup. So when I click on this button, it'll increment a counter, super simple stuff. At least that's like the first thing you ever do inside of a framework. You increment a counter and display it. That's a really good way of showing reactive rendering. And then the next thing that actually happens is it gives you a date printout of when you drank the last cup. So if I click now again, and you'll see that it updates to a couple more seconds. So that's what we're going to be working on. Super simple again, but it does cover a lot of the core concepts that we need to figure out. So that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up and show you. And I found that it actually does the job of kind of putting the framework through its paces a little bit. So first things first, because we're using Vue 3, actually no, wait, let's create the template first. That's what I said before. So let's make a div here. We don't really need classes right now. We're not going to use Tailwind or anything, and call this app. And we actually probably don't even need that, but regardless, let's just do it because I think I do some styling a little bit later on. So then we're going to need a H2. That's going to be our date. I'm just going to put dummy text in here for now, and we'll fill it with reactive text as we go. So after that, we're going to need our printout of the amount of cups that you've drank, right? So it's going to be just a paragraph tag, super simple, and it's going to be something like I've drank, 0 cups of water today, and I like putting a little emoji in there just to give it a little flare of color. That really doesn't matter, obviously. And then there's going to be actually a button, and this button is going to be I drank a cup. Just a really simple button. And then there's going to be another paragraph tag of I drank the last cup at, and it's going to be some live date. I'm just going to put live date in there, as you know. Again, this is not reactive yet. I'm just putting the HTML structure to the page. We're also going to have a little bit of style just so we can kind of see what's going on here in the center a little bit more. So let me just bring in the styles. I'm not going to kind of go over that. I'm not great at CSS, so I'm not the person that you want to come to with your CSS issues. That's for sure. But yeah, I know how to center stuff. And yeah, everything's centered. Everything looks good. Right now, the button does absolutely nothing because we haven't wired it up to anything, but we're going to get there. So first thing we're going to do, again, as I was saying right before we started, is actually bring in some of the dependencies that we need for the Vue Composition API. The Vue Composition API is the new way of kind of writing applications in Vue, at least the logic and the hooks and stuff like that. It's quite different than what they did initially with their kind of very, very discrete or very intentional lifecycle breakdown. So everything was kind of separated. Now you can kind of commingle everything, like your mounted and your computed variables and stuff like that. You can commingle all the hooks together, and essentially the goal of it is to kind of keep your functional logic together. So you're not doing stuff over here, you're not doing stuff down here, and then it's all kind of tied together in just your own head. Where in here you can actually kind of, if you're doing something to do with some like rendering function, and it needs to have a computed property and a mounted hook, it can all be done in the same block of code. And then it's a little bit easier when you go back to it a year later to understand that, okay, this all belongs together. So first thing we're going to do again is to import a couple things. So first we need to write an import statement from Vue. And what we're going to need initially is a ref. And I'll explain that first. So we're going to make a variable. Essentially, the first thing we're going to do here is increment this cup counter. We're going to kind of go one thing at a time. And while we're incrementing the cup counter, we're going to need a variable that's actually incrementable. So what that means is that it needs to be reactive. The renderer needs to know, the renderer is essentially the HTML, needs to know that this variable needs to be looked at, and if it updates, it needs to be updated in the template itself. So to do that, we're initially going to create a variable. So it's going to be a const for now. And it's going to be called cups of water. And this is where we're going to use the ref. The ref, again, states that it is a reactive variable. We want the renderer to know that it's reactive. And whenever it updates, we want the reactive variable to update, right? Okay, I don't know why it's giving us a... Oh, right. I forgot the most important thing. We need a setup function. Again, in Vue 3, with the Composition API, you need a setup function that kind of declares everything and has your core logic of the component. There's a new way of doing it nowadays where you can actually put the setup function, like a setup tag right in the script, but I haven't gotten around to that, and I don't know if I will use that in the future. We'll see. And again, if you guys feel free to ask questions in the chat, I'll be checking every once in a while. Feel free to do whatever you want in there. Okay, so we've created a variable called cups of water, and we've assigned it a 0 value in a ref. So the ref, again, is to declare that it is a reactive variable. We want to keep track of it. The next thing we need to do is actually create a function that will increment that variable. So we're going to do that by just very simply creating a function called drink cup. I'm just looking over here to see the references that I've been using the the different variables and stuff like that, because I've thought this out a little bit. And what we're going to do here is actually increment that cup. So cups of water. And usually in the old way of Vue, you would just do that if it was a data variable. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure, we actually have to access the value of that variable first and then increment it like this. And that's essentially it. That's all you would need to do to increment that cup. But if we look over here, so if we go here, let's add it to our render. And let's call it cups of water, right? That should render out a 0 here. But the reason it doesn't is because it's actually not accessible in the template until we return it. So we need to, again, be very intentional with what we want our template to see. This is, Svelte will be the simplest. That's 100%. So you'll see. But we need a return statement here that will return anything that we want from the setup that we want to use in the template. So that's two things for us right now. It's going to be cups of water, and it's going to be drink cup, because we want to access that function inside of the template. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. But you can see here, as soon as I did that, I've drank 0 cups of water. I don't have a 0 here. So now it's actually using the value that I've put in here. If I put a value of 5 in here, it'll actually, once it updates, it'll change it to 5. See that? So we want it to stay at 0. So we'll do a 0 here. And the next thing we want to do is we want to apply this function to the button. So whenever you click that button, it'll increment that counter. So that's in Vue, fairly simple to do. You just do an @click, and then you take this drink cup that we did here, and you put it as a click handler. So this essentially says on, DOM on @EventListener on click, do this function or whatever you want in here. You can actually put like full code in here if you want. Like really, we could have actually put cups of water ++ in here and it would have been fine. But I wanted to show like writing a function actually. And so now with that, theoretically, if we click this, yep, it increments the cup. So this is, again, this is like the first thing you ever do inside of a framework. This is nothing special, but it is, like, again, it's going to be important down the line when we go to Svelte and Vue, or Svelte and React, to show that there is a slight difference in handling these reactive variables in each one. So with that, what's the next thing we want to do? Let's do the date. So what happens here is what we want to do is we want to display today's date up here when the app loads. So when the app loads on mounted, essentially, we want the date to update to today's date. So in Vue, this is done with something called on mounted. Again, we're pulling it from Vue. It's a lifecycle event. It's a lifecycle hook. And since we pulled it from Vue, it's actually very simple to use. You just do an on mounted. You do that, arrow function it out, and boom. Anything you do in these brackets is going to be done essentially on, if you understand the JavaScript HTML side, DOM content loaded. But really, it's actually when the component mounts. So you can do it differently based on component. So when the component is created and it's finished rendering, it's going to fire this event, and I can do whatever I want in here. And in this case, what we're going to want to do is actually update a date. So here we can declare a date first, and we'll need this date to be a string. So let's let date equal ref. Boom, and we can actually probably use a const here since it never changes, and we never need to reference it in the actual code. So we do ref there. So now we have a date of nothing. So if we put this here and put date, again, it'll be blank until we actually tell the renderer that we wanted to do something. And it's still blank because we put nothing in there yet. But on mounted, what we want to do is actually assign it a new value, and we want to assign it a value of today's date. And it's really easy to do in JavaScript. I'll show you exactly how to do it. So we want to go date.value is equal to new date, boom, .to date string. Not exactly like that. Dot to date string. Boom. That's it. This is just a function of date. The date function is something that's available in all of JavaScript. You can use it whenever you want. New instantiates a new instantiation of the date object. So you can kind of create many of them, as many of them as you want. And with that, we've finished the second task of displaying today's date. Again, we're doing it in the onMounted lifecycle event. So when the component loads, displays today's date. If it's tomorrow, it'll show a different date. That's kind of how it works. The next thing we want to do, and the last thing, is we want to actually show the date of the last cup, the date and time, more the time actually, of the last cup you drank. So what we're going to do here is it's going to be similar, but we're going to actually do it in the drink comp event. So whenever you drink a cup, we want to update this date. And for that, we're actually going to need another variable. And what are we going to call it? We're going to call it const last cup. And we're going to give it again, it's a reference because it's going to be changed. Going to give it a thing of that. Theoretically, actually, this doesn't need to be a reference because it never changes. I'll think about that in a second. I always like to kind of optimize as I go. Like I write once and then I write once quickly to get everything working. And then as I go, I kind of like, if I write it again or if I go back to it, I like to change a couple little things to make it a little bit better. It's not really important for this kind of application, but I do want to show best practices as much as I can, even though I only know 50% of them probably. Essentially in Vue. In the other frameworks, I know none of them. So whoever's an expert in Svelte or Vue or whatever, you're going to have to be the one that kind of tells me how to do stuff properly, because I'm probably going to do it. I'm probably going to do it in a janky way, but we'll see. This is kind of a simple application, so I might handle it okay. So with this one, it's going to be kind of the same thing. After the cups of water value is incremented, what we're going to do is we're going to do a last cup dot value, and it's going to be very similar to this one, but instead of new date dot to date string, it's going to be to time string. See what we did there? So we don't want the date here, we actually want the time. And again, we're going to do the exact same thing here as we did before with exporting out last cup so the template can see it. It's going to re-render the application, and instead of live date, we're going to actually do last cup. The last cup is nothing, but now when I click this, it'll give me the time that I drank it. Now, there's one more thing that I want to do, and this is a key component of any reactive framework. The key thing here is I don't want to show this line of text unless a cup has been drank. So we're going to do a conditional render. So if there's no value in last cup, I want to hide this entire p tag. So that in Vue, it's a very simple Vue directive called vif, and as you can guess, that's just a vif statement. And in the vif, what we're going to do is we're going to reference last cup. And that's just going to detect if last cup is filled with anything. So if it's greater than 0, essentially, in any of its capacity. So in JavaScript, it kind of it infers your value, especially in your if statements, that if there's nothing there, it kind of assumes it's a null value, and it'll do a false in a vif statement. So as soon as you put something inside of last cup that's not a blank string, like this, it'll automatically render it because this all of a sudden becomes true. And that's really it. So those are the core concepts I want to show in every one of the frameworks. And we're kind of going to go, I think we're going to go straight to Svelte now. And then after Svelte, we'll go to React. And I'll explain why in a second, why we're going to go in that route. So that's that. I'm just going to check the chat right now. So we got Jabon in the chat. Do you recommend Vue Store app for an e-commerce? Yeah, absolutely. The Vue is fantastic for any sort of reactive thing, and there's plenty of frameworks. There's plenty of frameworks on top of Vue. There's plenty of libraries on top of Vue. You can do whatever you want with Vue to be able to handle e-commerce no problem. Like if you wanted to do a Nuxt store, Nuxt I think already has a starter template for e-commerce where it kind of connects to an e-commerce backend like Shopify or whatever. So there's plenty of stuff in Vue that makes e-commerce a lot easier to do. So definitely Vue is a great option for e-commerce. Vue really is a great option for any thing that requires a reactive framework. And that's not everything. Like a landing page, again, a regular static site, stuff like that doesn't really require a framework. So you can definitely build it in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and not worry about this kind of stuff. But as soon as you're dealing with stuff like e-commerce or stuff like a blog or anything that requires you to show many things on a screen that's reactive from some data that you get, so like an API, I like using frameworks for that kind of stuff like this because it makes, again, rendering a lot easier. The thing that we didn't show today that maybe I should have showed, and maybe we'll add it in depending on the time, is a loop statement inside of the template. Because that is kind of a key thing inside of frameworks where, like, you know, you get an array of elements of, like, again, blog posts, and you'll want to loop over them and show each element regardless of the amount in the array. Right? You don't want to have to, like, you know, detect exactly how many items are in there and code each item separately, like manually every time. That's what you would have to do with just plain, well, I don't want to say you do have to do it. There's definitely ways to do that in plain JavaScript. That's also really easy to do. But if you were just doing with like CSS and HTML, that's what you would have to do. Okay, so what we've done here is we created the view side of things. That's the thing. If anyone has any questions on the view side, let me know. And we're going to move on to the Svelte side right now. I can always jump back to view. It's not an issue. So let me just open up another code sandbox.io and go through it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is Svelte. So let's open up a Svelte application. I'm just going to open up my Svelte application that I've already written so that I have some reference code and I'm not blind. I know that might not be as fun for everyone, but for me right now, I don't want to really stumble through every single little thing. And all sandboxes, yeah. Svelte, okay, cool. So we got that set up. And yeah, thanks for the follow, Mr. Karstrom. So again, we're going to go through Svelte and get rid of everything that we don't need. That's kind of the thing. Yeah, absolutely, Keon, go ahead. Get out there and help him out. You can always come back and view the VOD and the YouTube video. I'll be posting all that stuff on Twitter, so check it out, and it'll probably be posted on the Discord as well, the HTML All the Things Discord. So we need the app Svelte, we need the button Svelte, we don't need the button Svelte. So what we're going to do here first in the app.svelte is get rid of everything that we don't need. We got the main styles, we got the main that, and we don't need the button, and with that we can actually just get rid of the button. Boom. Blank text, blank everything in here. I personally prefer having the template on top. As you saw in view, I like to have everything kind of match up, and this is again one of those things where these frameworks are pretty flexible in the sense that if you learn view, you can kind of utilize some of your basic knowledge and learn Svelte in a similar way. That might not be the best way to learn it. Maybe you should go to the best practices of having the main below or something like that. I don't really know why. But for me, like, I just like having the template on top. It's a really small thing, but it is what I like. So with having the template on top, we're going to, again, call main with an ID of app because we're going to assign a bunch of styles to the app. And that's going to be key. So with this, we're going to, again, create the basic HTML structure first. So H2. We're going to call it date. Again, we're going to do everything kind of very similarly, but I've drank 0 cups of water today. And I'm going to throw in the emoji of the water cup for whatever reason, because I'm obsessed with that emoji, I guess. Then we're going to do a button with I drank a cup, and then we're going to do a p tag with I drank the last cup at some time. Okay, so we've done the basic HTML structure that we need. Let's again bring in our CSS so that it looks a little bit better and it's in the center. Okay, let's get that kind of centered all right there. Okay, so we have all the basic structure. Now with Svelte, it's actually a little bit simpler. Like someone said in the chat a second ago, Svelte makes everything a little bit more clear, and it's a really simple language to understand as long as you understand the core three: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. JavaScript being the main one, obviously, because Svelte is a JavaScript framework. But again, understanding the core three is really important to understanding the whole all the components of the app. But with Svelte, you don't have to do any sort of setup function. You just literally write code inside of the script tags for each component. And we do the same kind of infrastructure as Vue, in the sense that like you pull in, especially Vue 3 with Composition API, you pull in different things that you need from Svelte. And if you don't need anything, you can just use the core basic function of Svelte. So the core functionality of Svelte is kind of a reactive side to the framework. So what we can do here is it's very simple. You can have a variable called let cups of water, so same as we called before, equals 0. So as you see, we don't need to use that ref. And the thing we can do here is we can actually render it without doing any sort of return statement or anything. We can just do cups of water, and it'll give us a 0 here. So we don't need to return it. We don't need to reference that it's a ref. Svelte assumes that everything that you do inside of the script tags will be interacted with and will need to be updated. So that's one thing that it does for us. So with that, we'll need a function that, allows us to drink a cup of water. And it's the same thing. So drink cup. And then we can just we don't need to reference its value. All we need to do is this. Okay, give it a second to update. Oh, right. We need to actually reference it on the button. So on the button, it's a little bit different, but it's very much the same. It is like this with... That's the syntax is different is what I was saying, but everything else is kind of the same because all we need to do here is just add a drink cup to the button. So in Vue, if we go back here, we used @click equals with quotes. In Svelte, we use the on-click event listener, and we use the little squiggly brackets. And after that, we have our reactive number. Super simple, nothing complicated yet. In fact, again, with Svelte, we're probably not going to get to a point where it's going to be complicated. So the next thing we want to do is do the date. This is where we pull in a Svelte hook. The hook that we want to pull in is called onMount. And it's the same kind of hook that we just pulled from Vue, the onMounted hook. And again, really simple to use. Pretty much the exact same way as with Vue. So really simple here. I don't know if we need to do an async here. The tutorial that I read said you need to do it, but let's try to do it without an async, just the same way we did Vue, just to see if it'll work and be a little bit easier to understand. And essentially here, what we want to do is, again, we'll need a let date equal just nothing, a string that with nothing in it, and then within here we'll want to do a date equal to, and do the exact same thing we did back here. So what do? Date string. We could just copy that. And as we can see here, it's actually not updating the date. So that makes me think that we do probably need an async here. And maybe a refresh. Oh, right. I'm going to remove the async. I just realized I'm dumb. Sometimes I am. We'll need to do one of these and actually reference it as date. Okay, so you don't need that async. Perfect. Everything looks almost exactly the same as Vue at this point. So the last thing we want to do, again, or the last two things we want to do is, one, put some a variable there called let last cup with just character. We want to actually update the time that you drank the last cup. You would not even need the onMount. You could use new date string in the template. True. The template runs when it mounts. Is that true, PG? Is that how it works? Like, what's the purpose of the onMount then? Okay, that's interesting. Let me. I mean, it makes perfect sense, obviously, but yeah, okay. I'm gonna keep the onMount just because, again, I wanted to give parallels from one to the other, but that makes perfect sense. We just proved that it does work. Thanks. Thank you for that. That is exactly the kind of stuff that I wanted to hear in the chat. Like I wanted to get a little bit more expertise from people that actually use Svelte a lot. Because again, I'm coming from the mindset of Vue, so I'm using the Vue mindset to learn Svelte. Whereas if someone was just learning Svelte without any sort of nonsense from Vue or React, they would do it probably differently. And like you said, you just did it straight up in the script. So last cup is equal to, and it's going to be the same again as we did before with the new date time string. I don't know why I'm doing that. I don't know why I mix up like putting semicolons and not putting semicolons. I don't like semicolons because they're not required, but essentially okay. So with that, we can actually change this to last cup. And boom, that works. And then the last thing we need to do is the conditional rendering part. So we need to put an if statement in here so that when there is no last cup date, we want this to not show up. So with that, it's a little bit different in Svelte than in Vue. There is no directives really. There is just kind of a templating syntax that we have to do. And it's also very simple, like it's not an issue. I don't see it as a problem at all. Something we can learn really quickly. So bam, that's all it is. You just put kind of like in squiggly braces #if. And again, the logic here, again, when you're learning from Vue to Svelte is, you know what conditional rendering is because you've done it in Vue. Now you just need the parallel in Svelte, and you just kind of go svelte.dev. And okay, so I need an if statement. Let's go to the docs, and let's see where this. We want to check, oh, boom, right here. If statement, super easy. And it gives you some examples. So as long as you understand the paradigm, you can then take that and utilize it in whatever language or whatever framework, whatever you use. That's kind of one of my main points of today that I want to very much clarify. So don't be afraid of trying new things, especially when you know something really well. Okay, so Svelte is done. That was really easy. Again, like PG said, Svelte was the easiest out of all of them. And it could have been even easier if I just did this. Theoretically, like I could have just done this. Made it simpler. Get rid of that. Boom. Make it even shorter, which is cool. I like that. So the next thing we want to do is do the React version. So like, yes, React is a little bit more complicated. No, we don't need to import the unmount. I can actually get rid of it. Good question. If we're not using it, we don't need to import it. And you shouldn't import it if you're not using it. That's the other thing. That's best practices. Yeah. So you got there. You don't need to import it. So that's as clean as you can get. Like, let's compare it to the Vue. That is a lot not as understandable, not as clear. I mean, to me, it makes sense because, again, I've learned Vue and I've learned the composition API and all that. It makes sense to me, but I understand for someone that's just looking at this for the first time or coming back to it after a couple of years, this would be more difficult to understand than this, just straight up. So Svelte is definitely a really cool framework, no doubt about it. But let's move on to the next one here, which is Code Sandbox React. React is the one that I know least, so I'll definitely have to throw up the React code for this. Again, we're going to go through and get rid of everything that we don't need. Sorry about that. I'm going to get rid of that. Index.js. That should be fine. Public index.html. Okay, so we should be fine there. It'll be also this probably. Get rid of that. So with React, it's a little bit different. That's 100%. It is a different paradigm of a language. It definitely has some similarities, especially to Vue composition. And today we're actually going to do functional React components with hooks. So there's a couple of different ways of doing React. There's the state way of doing it, so importing the state component. And then there's the functional component way where we don't need to import and change a bunch of stuff inside the component. And I'm going to say a bunch of nonsense with React because, again, I'm not an expert in it in any way, shape, or form, but I was able to kind of do this application in it fairly simply. Like, it took me maybe like 10 to 15 minutes to do it. So the skills that I learned from those other two frameworks definitely were transferable to React. That's, again, the main point of this conversation, of this video, and all that. Thanks for the follow, Kurajuice. Appreciate it. So for right now, what we're going to do is, again, set up the function. So we're going to set up the HTML. So in React, we do it a little bit differently. We do it in a return statement, and we're doing it with a different language. Yes, it's HTML, quote unquote, but it's actually JSX HTML, like compiling to HTML, or compiling to create element, I guess, more accurately. But it's written very similarly. So that's the good thing. So what we're going to do is, again, put a div here called with an ID of app. No capitals, don't need capitals there. And we're going to close that div. Boom. Stop yelling at us, which is nice. So we're going to have a h2 tag. Ugh, it sucks that it doesn't autocomplete as well in here because, again, this isn't HTML, it's JSX. So whatever Code Sandbox uses for React, it doesn't autocomplete it doesn't give me emit, essentially, for the HTML for whatever reason. It should, but it doesn't. And we're going to do the p tag here. In the p tag, what we're going to do is just have the I've drank 0 cups of water today. And again, my need for having the stupid emoji. It'll be the end of me, that's for sure. So we got that. What's going on here? Oh, date, right. That's why. We just want to put date for now because it handles rendering a little bit differently. Well, it actually handles it the same, but you'll see. So we got P, then we got a button. And in the button, we've got I drank a cup / button. Perfect. Okay, we got something in the chat. I heard someone say React. Were you describing how you tried all three and React is the most fun? I did not. I tried all three, yes. So we've actually done this application in Vue and Svelte already. Again, if you weren't paying it, or if you weren't on the live stream before, you will be able to go to the VOD. I'll post this on the YouTube channel of HTML All the Things as well. But what we're doing last is React because it's the one that I know least and the one that I think is most complex to learn out of the three. I don't think React is difficult to learn like overall, but if you're choosing which one's harder to learn, Svelte, Vue, or React, I would definitely lean towards React out of the three. But again, I'm not trying to make it seem like it's like impossible or, you know, a difficult thing or whatever. Totally doable, and React is still a great language, and I'll show why here. Like, you can still do everything very simply the same way that we were doing before. So, and then we're going to need a p tag here that says I drank the last cup at time, and we'll fill in that time a little bit later. Okay. Yeah, all good, Viable Clan member. All good. It's good. It's good that you're new. Thanks for stopping by. Just take a look at what we're doing here. And the other thing that we're doing with React is we don't write the styles usually in the same component. We write the styles in a separate file and import the styles in. That's just like a standard practice with React. So that's what we're going to do right now as well. We're just going to bring in the styles from the thing I already wrote. I don't want to write styles in here. And have it look exactly the same as all of our other applications, which is great. And again, so now we've done the template part. I'm not sure why it's telling me that it doesn't want this. Emojis should be wrapped in a span. Oh, whatever, I don't care. Okay, let's be serious now. So everything can be done inside of this default function called app. And that's what we're going to do right now. Thanks for the follow, Corpse. Or yeah, I think it's Corpse O or something like that. So what we're going to do here is, again, we're going to create a reactive variable that can increment. That's going to be the first thing we do. So the first thing, we're going to use some React hooks right off the bat. So the React hook we need to be able to use reactive variables is called useState. So we're going to import useState from, again, it's the same thing that we did with Svelte and Vue from React. And we're going to start kind of declaring our variables here. So we're going to do cups of water equal useState 0. Okay. And this kind of says that, hey, we want this variable to, again, be watched. We want it to be updated in the template, in the JSX when it updates. And that's the main thing. So if we look back at Vue, we had this ref. Ref and useState is very similar. So, oh, yes, sorry. Very, very good point. Cups of water, and yeah, I was actually gonna get there, but yeah, we can do that. We can do that right away. Cups of water. So, and I'll describe that. So how this works, it's a little bit different than Vue as well. So useState has two things that it comes back with. It comes back with the actual useState variable, so the value, quote unquote, and it comes back with a function to actually set that value. So when you want to set cups of water, before, let's say in Vue, we were using .value to set cups of water. We're actually going to use a function to set it called set cups of water, because again, it returns into two different variables, and we are deconstructing it into cups of water and set cups of water. This being the actual variable, the value, and this being the function that sets the value. So with that, thank you for reminding me. No, it's good. It's all good, Viable Clan member. It's all good. I'm glad that you pointed it out, because it was kind of good to describe it all in one go. Anyway, I was gonna do it one by one. I was actually gonna go and like show that, oh, this isn't working, and go back to it. But it's all good. I think it makes sense. And the Edel currently you inspired me to create with JS. Thanks for. Oh, no problem. No problem. I'm happy that I can inspire you in any sort of way. Ooh, I should make a fourth example in Vanilla.js. Ooh, maybe. That's actually a really good idea. And see what it takes to do this. It's not... It'll be completely doable, and it will be pretty readable, but it's not as clean, in my opinion, to do this kind of stuff with plain JS. But it is valuable to know, so I think it is important for me to do that. I'm definitely going to do it. HTML lit. I have not used HTML lit. I've heard of lit in general. I've also heard of stuff like Alpine.js and HTMX and stuff like that. I haven't used it yet. I've used HTMX, sorry, that's like a server-side rendering thing, but I have not used lit or Alpine, but they're kind of the same. Okay, so with this, what we want to do again is actually make a function called drink cup, right? And with that function, we want to actually increment the value of cups of water. Now, before we do that, let's actually use the value that we've created here, the cups of water, inside of our template. And in here, it's actually very similar to Svelte, where we just kind of can use it. We don't need to return it or anything like in Vue. We can just use it whenever we have actually assigned it up here. Trying to get the fundamentals down. All good. You should, yeah, exactly. If you understand JavaScript really well, understanding the frameworks like React, Vue, and Svelte, or anything really, is really a lot easier. If you're just going into development and you just jump into React, totally doable, totally a viable option, especially if it's something that drives you to learn. I'm not saying anything bad about it, but what it does do is it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to then go and learn something like Svelte, something like Vue, and whatever other new frameworks come out, because everything is built on the fundamentals of JavaScript. And there are certain things like you're seeing right now that, you know, this useState thing, this deconstruction of a variable, like deconstruction of a function, like it's all, those are all JavaScript concepts that are being put into place to give us this reactive framework. And when you understand the concepts themselves, it makes it a lot easier to understand the framework and then switch later on. That's all. But again, if you're learning React right now, like if you're listening to me and you're like, oh shoot, I should go back and learn JavaScript, and then you get stuck in JavaScript and you hate it with a passion and you stop learning, that's way worse than you just going down the path of you learning React, becoming a developer, and then maybe going after a while, after you become comfortable, going back and learning some core concepts. That's a perfectly reasonable approach to it. And I just want to make sure that everyone that's learning continues learning. That's really the main key, learning inertia. So with drink cup, it's going to be very similar. Again, really simple, but the difference is we're actually going to use the set cups of water function to increment cups of water. And we're going to increment before we render, because if we do it the other way, it actually will only show us 2 increments after the second one, which was interesting for me to know. That I'm so impressed with JS. Okay, exactly, a race condition. So it happens after this renders. After this renders this cups of water. That's why. So if we do it before, we actually have to set the drink cup on something. So we have to do very similar thing to Svelte and Vue. Use an onClick and drink cup. You're saying it's. Oh, I see what you're saying. Still a race condition. So it's better to do it. Just do cup plus 1. Except it'll be something like that. Okay, cool. That's fair. Again, I'm all in on learning the best practices of this stuff, because I don't know React very well, and especially with this kind of stuff, like that could probably screw me over down the line if I ever were to go into it. Like a little thing like that would like make me frustrated if I set a race condition that all of a sudden just didn't make sense. Race conditions are essentially the bane of my existence anyway, and the bane of any programmer's existence. Especially when it's indeterministic. Those are the worst. Okay, so we've set the cups of water. That's all good to go, right? Let's just refresh, make sure that everything works well. Boom, we're good there. So we've done the basic functionality of a framework, set a variable, rendered it out on screen, and incremented that variable. Super simple. I can click a button every... Yes. Fair enough. Fair enough. Viable clan member, fair enough. I like that name. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is, again, we're going to set this date. And here we're going to need to use something called useEffect. Correct me if I'm wrong, Viable Clan member. I don't think this will work directly inside here. We're going to need to actually use something called useEffect, which is again an on-mounted on-load hook, React hook. useEffect. Oops, we don't need to do it in 2 different lines. That was dumb. useEffect. Boom. So we're going to bring it in, and we're going to use it. Again, it's a little bit of a weird way of writing an on-mounted hook, because it is essentially on-mounted plus extra. There's a bunch of other things that you can do with it. But today, we're focusing on, again, if we go to View, we're focusing on this on-mounted. And that's what we're going to use it for. And there's a way to use it for just that, did component mount, essentially. So useEffect, same way we did it before. We're going to do the arrow function, simple arrow. In here, we're going to do the same thing that we did before. So first thing we need to do is actually create this variable. And again, whenever you create a variable, you want to deconstruct it. You can, I believe you could do it without deconstructing it, but then you have to like reference each one differently. So we're gonna deconstruct it. That's the better way to do it. So we want to have a date and then a set date. And that will equal useState with quotes. And we're going to use that date in the useEffect. And we're going to, again, set date, because that's what that's a deconstructed method for changing the value of the thing that we want to change. And inside of set date, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did before. Let's do it the proper way, I guess, without the race condition. D is equal to, or do we? I don't think the race condition actually matters in this one, because we're not changing it. It's just being set. I think that's fine. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Viable. And okay, so we're using that. We're using the use effect. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So we have the date. We have the thing that's setting it. So now we have to actually render it. Again, the rendering is super simple with React. We just put it into here like that. And it's giving us a little bit of an error here because right now the use effect is doing multiple different things. It's waiting for it to update and stuff like that. So what we can do to stop that is just add a blank array, and that will essentially tell it, okay, we're only looking at it as an on-mounted event. Oh, did component mount? And then it's not waiting to have any sort of other effect. It's not waiting for a return, nothing. So just makes it a little bit more efficient. It will work without it, but it makes it a little efficient there. So now we have, again, the date being shown on the mount. We have the cups being shown, and the next thing we got to do is add the date into here, the time, sorry, of the last cup drank. So that is, again, not very difficult, but it's the same kind of thing as this. So we're going to, I'm just going to copy this because us developers, we like to copy, and last cup, and set last cup. You state there, and in here it's going to be the same thing where we set last cup. Again, we're using that deconstructed function, and with that deconstructed function we're going to throw it in and do the same thing that we did here, where we take the new date and set the time string. And then we need to actually use last cup somewhere, so we're actually going to use it cup at time. Instead of time, we're going to use last cup. And boom, we have pretty much all the functionality. We're missing one more thing. So we're missing the conditional rendering. This can be done in a million different ways with React, because essentially what JSX is it's JavaScript with a renderer that's saying, like, you know, if it sees something it knows, like a div or h2 or p, to render it as HTML. But you can use almost direct JavaScript in here by just kind of putting squiggly brackets around it, and then it's like, okay, so I need JavaScript. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to use a ternary function to detect if last cup is there, then render out this thing, and if last cup is not there, you know, nothing. So if we do a refresh here, you can see that it actually has nothing. Yes, so I did see that viable clan member, the last cup, and what is that, like, what is that, the difference there, if you can explain it? Love to hear it. So what the person in chat last viable clan member is saying is that there's another way of doing this with an and, with a double and. Set date in that second argument should produce the same result. Yeah. Returns false is it's falsy, yeah. And React doesn't render anything for false. So you're saying, like, oh, I see what you're saying. So wait, are you saying this? Yeah, you're saying that. Yeah. Okay, so that's how I saw it as well. But I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. So I did it the ternary operator route. So it's good that we can kind of do it. Again, you can do it whatever way you want. I think you can just do plain old if statements if you want it to be a little bit more readable. Because this, to me, as someone like just learning, if I was just learning JavaScript or something like that, this to me is confusing. But I get it. Like, I get your explanation of it. But and it is clean, like super clean. But yeah, it's like, you can't do it if inside. Okay, so you can't do like a regular if inside the code. Okay, cool. Good to know. So then the ternary statement is kind of the other option to do that. So we've seen both of that, but essentially that's it. So we've done all three now. We have working applications that are the same in all three languages, and I'm actually going to post the code for this for all three, or share all three with you guys. I believe it's on my Twitter. I'm just going to try to find that post and kind of share it in the chat so that people can take a look if they want. Might take me a little bit. I mean, the other thing I can do, I guess, is just like actually like share this. So let me see here. Copy sandbox link. Where's the date used? Oh, the date is used right here at the top. Right here. Yeah. Yeah, it's just to set the, like, show you what day it is today. That's it. Nothing special there. So there's that one. Here is copy sandbox link. There is the Svelte. And share, copy sandbox link. And here is the view. So you have all three there. If you were following along, might be interesting to you. And again, I do like the suggestion of doing it in plain JavaScript. I do have to kind of cut this short soon, just because I got to get to my actual job, to my actual work. But really, this is really awesome. Connect for React. I'd make your lets into const for React. Sure. It's a good point. React is fine with that. Okay, cool. I'm glad it was informative. React and Svelte apps do not work. They don't work? Like the code for them? Let's just take a look here. Oh, you know what? It's because I haven't saved. Sorry. My bad. I need to save. Okay, try it now. Try refreshing now. I forgot that Code Sandbox actually doesn't autosave for you. You actually have to intentionally Control S and save. My bad. Again, I haven't streamed in a little while, so I'm happy that I was able to get one in. Thanks to everyone for joining this stream. We have a podcast that we do. It comes out every Wednesday. It's the HTML All the Things podcast. So if you haven't checked that out, would love it if you give it a go. Podcast.htmlthings.com. We are working on a new site as well. It's coming soon. That's why I was not going to go there. But yeah, it's right here. It's coming really soon. Potentially tomorrow or the day after. We've been working on it for quite a while. And yeah, check that out. Again, every Wednesday about around 12 p.m. Eastern we release. Sometimes we do 2 episodes with the web news. Just to give you a little bit more content. And yeah, there's also a Discord community if you want to come join. I can share the link to that. It's pretty, I love the community, but obviously it's our Discord community. So that's why I love it. Let me just share that with you all if you guys want to join something new. Awesome. Thanks for enjoying the podcast. Really appreciate that. Here's the Discord community link. Here's the podcast link. I might as well throw that in the chat as well, so that everyone can enjoy whatever it is they want to enjoy. If you want, you can just interact with me on Twitter. I'm on there all the time at HTML Everything. Let me throw that up there too. I'm sure a lot of you are from the Twitter because that's where I posted and that's where I got the most interaction with this. But yeah, thanks PG for the follow. Thanks Corpso. Appreciate all the help through this, Viable Clan member. Thanks for sticking around, chatting with me. But yeah, I've got to get to actually my work, which is still sitting in this chair and doing coding. But yeah, I have to get on a stand-up pretty soon. So yep, work, exactly. Thank you everyone for sticking around, and goodbye. Goodbye.